I'm so excited to have you on again. You are our returning guest supreme. This is your third time on the podcast, and I couldn't not have you on because it's always so much fun, and you always leave me feeling so inspired, and we always get such great feedback from the interviews with you. So thank you so much for returning again. Really excited to have you here.
Oh, yay. I'm so happy to be back. What an honor. 3 times.
Yeah. I should just acknowledge, in case anyone is watching this as a video podcast, we are twinning right now. We had a good giggle when we both came on. So as you can see, we are kindred soulmates or whatever across seas from Australia to San Francisco. And I was actually fortunate to be able to meet Shira in real life only just like a week ago or just over a week ago.
That was such a treat.
Which is crazy. And we had not enough time, but a lot of fun. So it's good to connect again. All right, we're going to get into, because when I met Shira, she gave me, and actually I will hold this up just in case anyone is watching it as a podcast. This is her book. You might be seeing it in reverse. This is her new book. And I'm so excited to talk about this because, as I was saying to Shira before we hopped on, there are a lot of books in this sort of lifestyle space. And when Shira gave it to me, I thought, oh, great, I'll read this in about an hour, because often when I get, these kind of lifestyle books, it takes me about an hour, maybe 2 hours, and I've read the whole thing. And I've been reading it for several hours, and I'm still only at the beginning, which is a good thing, because it's really jam-packed. It is really a Bible for all the things in your life that you feel that you just want to have, for want of a better word, control. I mean, I don't like the word control, but to feel like it's all about being intentional and living a life that's in alignment. And we're going to get into some of the big ideas. And I've also put a call out for questions. So we're going to got some questions that I had people through Instagram ask. So really excited to get into all of this. So the book is broken up into kind of two key areas. One is the toolkit, and you talk about the idea of adjusting the volume, which I really like this analogy, because I think that when it comes to our lives and how we live our lives and all the things that we do, I think that particularly when it's to do with this area of being organized and having your life organized, and even to do with your first book being minimalista and the sort of the term minimalism, sometimes it can feel like there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure to get this right, to be perfect. And so this concept of adjusting the volume, I feel like it's a good counterpoint to pressure that people might be feeling in relation to having a perfect home or getting everything right. Because I think that perhaps people, and I'd be curious of your take on this, who are attracted to these ideas are perhaps people who have maybe perfectionist tendencies, or maybe otherwise they're just a hot mess in some ways. And it's like they feel like they'll never get there. So what's your take on this in terms of this between wanting to have a home, have a life that feels like it's calm and it's, in alignment, but then also not wanting to feel completely overwhelmed by that expectation and not wanting to get caught up in everything's got to be perfect?
Yeah. So it's interesting because I've spent, 15 plus years now helping people edit their homes and edit their lives. And so much of my work is about editing and subtraction and reduction. But what I've realized is everybody has a different clutter threshold and a different kind of valuation of what enough looks like and feels like. And I think that's why this work is so interesting, because we're all such unique snowflakes. And so, for me, I talk about in the book, it's like, I don't even drink coffee. So like, I don't need a lot of coffee mugs, but for a client of mine who lives in the South and loves entertaining, like she wants to have 3 different sets of very glamorous coffee and tea mugs and paraphernalia and tea kettles. So there is no like one right perfect amount. And I think the perfectionist brain in all of us, always goes to like, well, how do I do it right? Or what's the exact right number? People are always asking me like, well, how many t-shirts am I supposed to own? And I don't know, right? Like, I'm an expert in terms of helping people arrive at their right number, but not dictating what that right number is. And so I talk about volume in this new book in a way where it's almost like a radio dial that you can turn up or turn down. And some people, probably rare unicorns, have taken minimalism too far and they feel like, I don't have anything left. I need to like do some addition. And then I talk about volume in all of these different realms in the book, like friendship and relationships, finances, your career, right? And so there will be different seasons in your life where maybe you feel lonely or you've moved to a new town and you need to turn up the volume in terms of forging new relationships, connecting with people, putting yourself out there. Or maybe you're at a point in your life where you're like, I've spent my whole life acquiring friends and people and colleagues, and I'm drowning and I don't have time. And now it's time to curate those relationships and kind of turn the volume down on who and how you invest. So that's why I love that this volume tool, because it's so customizable. It's like only you can feel when you've hit that perfect right amount on the dial.
Yeah. And so, as I mentioned, you've done 2 other books. So, I guess, and I'm sure you've been asked this question a million times now. How is this book different to your other books?
Yeah. Okay. So, Minimalista, my first book, which is probably the book I'm the most known for, really just dives into the realm of the home. And it's like a step by step toolkit and guide for here is exactly how to edit and organize and style every room in your home. Then my second book, Organized Living, was like a really fun departure where I interviewed other organizers all around the world and toured their homes. And so every chapter is a different organizer, a different home, and kind of this diverse array of tips. This new book is actually more of a personal development book, which is probably why you found it a little bit denser. It's still, I really wanted to make it beautiful and stylish, but it has far less images because it really is like a hardworking guidebook for your life. And the thrust of it is that in part 1, I talk about how to edit and organize your life and these 3 tools. So volume, which we talked about, systems, which is, you know, everyone knows what a system is, but in this context, it's like the simplest route to solving a problem or a challenge in your life is a system. And then I get into habits, which is the 3rd tool, which is so hard for all of us because we're human beings and we're set in our ways and change is threatening to our brains. And so I talk a lot about how to push yourself out of your comfort zone with establishing new systems and habits that your brain might have a temper tantrum around because it's new and it's scary and your brain wants to keep you safe and cozy. And then in the second part of the book, I show how to apply these 3 tools to every part of your life. So I like to think of it as like a life handbook that you could refer back to at any season of your life. I wrote it for myself as much as for everybody else because I felt like I really had the home editing and organizing down. But when I wrote this book, I felt like I needed to kind of put myself through the paces of editing my to-do list, editing how many credit cards I had, looking at my relationships critically. So this book is really the culmination of me going through this process myself and then sharing everything I learned.
Yeah. And it's got so many great journal prompts. I feel like whatever topic you're discussing, you give lots of good, really good questions. And I'm going to turn the tables on you towards the end of the interview and ask about some for you. But it's got really, really great journal prompts. So it's very practical as well as insightful. And, you know, it's got your fun way of writing and sharing your story. Like, do you want to share maybe the in relation to habits? Because I think habits is something that people do really struggle with, making a habit stick as well. But you share about wanting to give up ice cream. So can you share?
Yeah, so this is a story about realizing I didn't really want to give up ice cream. So I was introduced to this cool company in Berkeley, California, where I live, called the Berkeley Habit Labs, and they were doing an experiment to help guide people through the process of building or breaking a new habit. And I think it was like a 12-week program. And so I showed up and I said, all right, I want to quit sugar and quit ice cream because I eat far too much of it and I know it's not good for me. And they said, well, okay, great. Why do you want to quit ice cream? And I was like, I don't. I really don't. I really love ice cream and I feel so connected to ice cream. And my dad loved ice cream and we used to make it together. And so these poor people looked at me and they were like, Shira, we would love to help you, but it doesn't seem like this is a goal you actually want. And so I had this kind of light bulb moment that really, like, one of the big keys to establishing a successful new habit is you have to have a compelling reason to want to modify your behavior. And when I realized I actually didn't want to stop eating ice cream at all, they were able to coach me towards a new habit, which was I wanted to do more yoga. And that felt really compelling because I always feel better when I do yoga and energized and all the things. So we completely pivoted. But I think for me, the big takeaway there was that before you take any action, really with anything, you've got to establish a really compelling, motivating reason. And if you don't have one, you might need to step back and question, do I actually really want this thing?
Yeah. And what would you say, because obviously you work with clients in relation to their homes, what are some of the biggest challenges for making habits stick? Or, is there a process? I know you kind of break it down a little bit in the book, but, what do you find really helpful to, because you can have, okay, so you've got the intention, okay, I'm going to go and do yoga. I really want to make this happen. And then it's like, oh, I had a busy and I'm tired and like all the reasons come up. So how do we make habits stick from your experience?
Yeah. So I outline in the book a whole ton of habit helpers, but I'll just say a few that come to mind that have been personally helpful for me. So I love a reward. I think most humans love a reward. And so for me, I've got to link a habit to a reward or it just seems like a chore. So a really simple example is like, a few years ago during COVID when I couldn't go to my yoga class, I was like, well, I guess all I can do is take a walk. But that didn't seem very exciting. So I needed to pair it with like, I'm going to buy myself cute workout clothes. And if I walk for X amount of days, then I'm going to get like cute new Nikes to walk in. And I'm going to pair it with my favorite podcast that I can only listen to when I'm walking, right? So it's taking that thing that maybe you have some friction around and thinking, how do I make this more fun for my brain and more engaging? For me, I mean, I think we're all social creatures. Pairing any new habit with another human being, like an example would just be like if you have a hard time getting to the gym or getting to a yoga class, asking your bestie, hey, do you want to sign up for this and do it together? And then afterwards we can go get a coffee or a smoothie and have a chat, but making it something where you're then accountable, not just to yourself, but to somebody else. That has been very helpful for me. Like if I'm ever struggling to go to a class, I will call a friend and say, want to go to this class? And it's so much easier to know that you're going and you're meeting someone. Some of the other things are just thinking about how to reduce friction. So for me, what I was finding initially when, I wanted to make it a habit to wake up every morning and move my body, that's the first thing I wanted to do. But I'd wake up and I'd want to get on my phone and I'd want to hang out with my kids. And so a few of the things I did to create friction were I started hiding my phone from myself. So it was downstairs on a whole different level. So I couldn't just roll over and get it. And then the night before, I would literally put out all of my yoga clothes, fill my water bottle, have everything prepped by the door. So it almost felt silly not to do it. It was like I've already done all the prep. In terms of people in their homes, the same types of things, right? Like having a reward system. Like my kids know, they want to come in the front door and just dump all of their stuff in a pile. But they know that it's not until they've hung up their coat and their backpack and put their lunch in the sink, then they can go have a snack or a treat or watch a show or call a friend. So that's like, our version of a treat. So I think it's always pairing, like, what is that difficult thing? How do I remove the friction and the obstacles and make it as easy as possible to succeed? And how do I pair it with something or somebody that feels fun?
Yeah, no, I love that. And as you were saying that, a few things, examples came up in my own life. We go surfing as a family. Now, I'm not the world's best surfer. I can get up on a board, I can catch a wave but I'm not the world's best surfer. But I do it because my family enjoy doing it. And whenever it's time to go surfing, I always think, I don't want to do this, because it's not something that comes naturally to me, because I don't do it consistently enough. We go, say, once a week, and sometimes we won't go for a little while if there's northerly winds and all of these things. But because my husband always says, come on, and afterwards, I always say, I'm so glad I did this.
Right.
I feel so much better. Like, it's such a mental break when you do it. It's kind of like yoga. You can't think of other things while you're surfing because you're too busy trying to, like, is this wave? No, not this wave. And you got to paddle and all of it, so you're completely out of your head, which I love. So it's like having that accountability of, my family's doing it. So, okay, well, I'm there. I might as well go in now.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. And similarly with I know you've got a daughter or daughters who play soccer, as do I. And I started in a women's soccer team this year, like a summer sixes, which is a short kind of season and short games. And again, I'm like, oh, I don't want to go to training tonight. But my daughter, she always comes to training with me because, like, she just loves soccer so much and she trains with us. And I'm like, okay, I got to go because I know that my daughter really wants to go. So, like, again, having those things where you've got that accountability. And I'm one of those people that and I think it's probably working out, like, what are the things that motivate you? And for me, I hate letting people down. So for me, to be really conscious of that is really important. So yeah,
exactly.
It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I think also just making it as tiny as you can, because I think our brains get really overwhelmed with anything new that feels like it's rocking the boat. So, like, as much as I wanted to go be a marathon runner, I was like, my only objective is to take a 15-minute walk, like, in a circle in my neighborhood. And that felt doable to my brain. And then once I got out the door, I typically end up walking for 45 minutes or an hour. But I think an hour would have felt too overwhelming to start. So it's like, whatever that thing is that you want to do, think about. I mean, BJ Fogg, who's a habit expert, he wrote the book Tiny Habits. He talks about, for people that want to get in the habit of flossing, to just floss one tooth. And I thought that was so funny, but that it really is just like, once you get the floss out and you floss one tooth, you're probably going to just floss. But mentally, you have to tell yourself, like, it's okay. We just have to do this 1 second little tiny thing.
Yeah. For me, it's like, okay, just get in the car.
Right.
Once I'm in the car, it's like, okay, we're at the beach now. All right, just put the wetsuit on, or, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like that next step.
Exactly.
So I wanted to ask you, I've asked you how this book is different to your other books. And I'm really curious about, how are you different to when you started writing Minimalista? Because that's now quite a few years ago. And you've been on this journey with writing books. I'm curious about how you're different, and then also, how you see the world of organizing and how that's all changed in a kind of post-pandemic world as well. So, but I did want to ask you how you feel different. Like, what's your journey been like personally? Because I'm sure it's been quite a journey for you.
Yeah, huge. I think, I got the book deal for Minimalista right before COVID and lockdown and all of that. And so my life changed so profoundly, and my career changed so profoundly, because I think, in a sense, I felt lucky because, my colleagues kind of went from seeing clients every day in their homes to not being able to work at all. And I had this big, juicy project as a first-time author for at least that first year of COVID. It kept me quite busy. I think personally, when I think about, where I am now, I think I've become much better with boundary setting. And I think I think that comes from age and confidence. And so I think I used to just feel like I have to say yes to everything and everybody as I'm growing my career. And now, I guess as a result of saying yes for so long to so many people and opportunities, um, I've been able to kind of collect some data and some wisdom and just be more confident in my own decision making abilities, where I feel like now the places where I put my time and energy and attention are much more intentional. And I think I've been able to divest from things that don't feel that interesting or like that much of a value add. Whereas before, I think I never would have said no to like a press opportunity or an article. And now I will think like, well, this might take me like 3 hours to write. And what else could I be doing with that time? And is it really going to move the needle in a meaningful way? And so I just say no a lot more to a lot of things. That's kind of, I think, the biggest shift is being more comfortable setting boundaries, saying no, especially in relationships. I think that was another, probably a COVID result of like making my world much smaller in terms of who I spend time with, how much time I spend with different people. I talk about in the new book this idea of curating your ideal connection cadence. And I think I have realized as I've gotten older, I really like being alone. And I'm a social person. I love and value my girlfriends and my family, and of course, my husband and my kids. But I need to be alone much more than I think I ever realized or kind of respected about myself. And so now I really like I can spend a full day alone, and like I go eat lunch by myself, I'll see a movie by myself, I take long walks by myself, and it really has helped me feel more grounded and more solid and more focused. It's just been kind of great. And I think that has been really probably because I've been writing books for 3 years and I've had to be alone so much, that I think it's really improved my relationship with myself.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's beautiful.
It's
I
kind of
mean,
funny.
I'm definitely an introvert when it comes to things like that. And if anything, I feel that I've kind of tipped the balance at times a little bit too much that way. And I need to course correction. And that's sort of one of the reasons why I'm doing the soccer with a group of other women, because it's like, I
Right.
need to, foster more connections and
Right.
non-work connections as well, because I can find it very easy, and I can connect really easily with people who are entrepreneurs and or in that whole
Yeah.
world, and I love that, and I wouldn't not want to have that. However, I do think, for me anyway, in this season of my life, it's important for me to create connections that aren't related to work as well. And so yeah, that's something that I've kind of, that's why I'm doing soccer and killing myself every week on the soccer field.
That is really brave of you. Yeah. I think it's funny when I think, because even when we met for coffee, I think we talked about work for like 2 hours straight, and I could have done that forever. And I think you're right. Like when you own your own business and you're a solo entrepreneur, it can be so easy to kind of make your whole life around work and business development, especially if you're passionate about what you're doing. And I kind of confessed in this book when I do this life audit process where I kind of look at the different buckets of my life, and one of them was like leisure and recreation. And I was like, oh God, like what even is that? And what do people do? Like, am I supposed to take a nap or like have a picnic? I don't know what to do. So that is something I'm definitely working on, is like diversifying how I spend my time, which is really hard for me.
Yeah, yeah, no, I can relate. I also wanted to ask you, as I mentioned, how do you think the world is different in
Yeah.
relation to people's homes? And, you've been, like you say, you've been working with clients for 15 years. And
Yeah.
we have been talking in general, both you, myself, other people out there in the world, the Marie Kondos of the world, about, simplifying and all of these things. Do you think we're any closer, or do you think we're further away, or is it just we're treading water? Like, what do you think in general when you go see clients, or in general, where,
Yeah.
when you look over this journey and, before even your other books as well, where are we at right now in this kind of post-pandemic world in relation to homes and, being more organized and intentional with what we have in our spaces?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of room for improvement. I think, what I've seen is, I'm in the US where it's like shopping is a habit for people. We almost don't think anymore, do I need this? It's just, I'm going shopping like the way you would go to the movies. And I think, the field of being a professional home organizer is predicated on a culture that has acquired more than it can keep up with. So the truth is, if we got this right, my career would be obsolete, and probably that would be a good thing for the planet, right? So I guess the good news is I have job security, but the bad news is I really do see us collectively struggling with too muchness, the desire for more, the use of consumerism as a band-aid for bigger issues and problems and life stressors. And I think, while I only work with a handful of people one-on-one now, so I do think the people that work with me are really invested in changing their behavior and changing their perspective. And I think most people who hire a professional are at a point of feeling like, I want to make a change. And so I do see huge transformations all the time. So I'm very optimistic about that. I think it's more probably I spend too much time on social media. So I just feel bombarded constantly with like, even feeling like, Instagram, which I know we're both on, used to feel so much more creative and expressive. And for me, I barely scroll anymore because I feel like it's a commercial. Like I'm just looking at like, buy these sweatpants, you need this lotion, and I think, I've talked to so many, both clients and just my girlfriends who say like, I got on my phone, and the next thing I knew, I had ordered like a sweatsuit and a water bottle and a cell phone case that I didn't need. So that's where I really see like the shift has to happen. And I don't know, because of, corporate greed is real and people make a lot of money when we buy things. And so I don't see that going away, the pressure, but I do see there is hope for people who are burnt out and see that stuff isn't making them happier and feeling like they want to invest their energy in other pursuits. I feel very optimistic about that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess there's been just so much noise. Obviously there's just been a big US election, which I think has consumed the world, and the outcome
Yeah.
of that. And, I think that certainly for me, I remember when I was writing my book Still, and I felt that as I was writing that, there was all this awareness of people really thinking about landfill and, the amount of plastic in the world and all of these things. And then it felt like then we hit COVID, and then that kind of became irrelevant, because then it was like all about, okay, everything's got to be plastic. I mean, still as they go through airports, it's like, put it in this
Yeah.
plastic bag, put it in this, like tip out your water bottle, like throw your water bottle out, all of these things that it's all just, you got an air, drives me nuts, like how much waste and, so that kind of broader kind of approach, I feel like we kind of lost our way a little bit.
Yes.
But, and I think that, yeah, there is just so much noise online that it's increasingly hard to sort of pull away from that. And yeah, I'm just really, I'm still trying to decide, like, or understand, I guess, in my own mind where we're at in it. And I think that also, and then that's why I was curious about with your own personal journey, because I feel that, like you say, like we are a little older. And so personally, I kind of feel like, some things that, I'm actually just not interested in anymore. You know what I mean? Like
Right,
some things I'm
right.
like,
Yes.
we don't need this in our life, or, this is actually much more important, or, yeah. So I think it's like that maturity maturing as you grow older, like you say, learning to say no to boundaries. And so for me, it's sort of become less about, I guess, the stuff in my home and more about quality of my life, if you know what I mean.
Yes. Oh, yeah, that's so beautifully said because I think it is like you've got to have a more compelling yes to say no to something because otherwise you just feel like restriction and deprivation, right? And I think people they feel kind of graspy when I talk about editing or decluttering because it's like, oh, you're taking away. But I think the way you and I both see it is like, no, it's actually additive to subtract because you're getting more time and more energy and more freedom. And you can do all of these things like travel or, pursue a hobby because you're not managing your stuff every weekend. So I do think there's an increasing awareness of that. And I think I also know more and more people who are taking social media breaks or deleting apps from their phone or going back to an old school flip phone. I think there are these like great movements. And what kind of propels me forward with my work is just wanting to be an example, a public example of doing less, buying less, living with less, but having like, I love my life. I have a very dynamic life and I travel and, I don't live this kind of like quiet, austere, stoic lifestyle. And so I think sometimes we're fed the message so much that like more is better and more will make you happier that what I try to do and put out into the world is really the exact opposite, is that actually it's going to make you feel sad and tired and exhausted. And I know this from 15 years of working with people. It is not making anyone happier.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm curious, what I did really love about with the book as well is you sort of share, honestly, some areas of your home where you're not in inverted commas perfect. And, you give the example of, say, your fridge, and you sort of say like the fridge, it's like, it's a constant, a movable feast in terms of the things that are going on there. And I can completely understand in terms of, having children who are baking and all of those things. Although I will say one of the first things that I did when I came back from my trip, the first morning I woke up was I cleaned the fridge. I was like, I cleaned and organized the fridge because I was like,
yes,
I just can't cope with how this fridge is looking right now.
It feels so good, but at least in my house, it gets disrupted so very fast. Like I will, wipe down the shelves and centralize and group things. And then 5 minutes later, I go and I'm like, what are these random balls of tinfoil and, Chinese takeout containers? And yeah, my family, God love them, but they are like shovers and pilers in the fridge. And I think it is a thing where, I talk about in the book, the upside of lowering the bar, that sometimes it can feel really good to say, you know what, this thing doesn't matter that much to me and I'm just gonna take it off my plate. So for me, it's like, I'm terrible at keeping plants alive. I give up on gardening. I will never garden again. You too, I'm so surprised.
I'm so bad with plants.
Oh, and you know what else I'm bad at that always shocks people? I'm really not a great folder. And so, people put me in that category of like, Marie Kondo, and are you, condoing? And I'm like, no, like I just don't own that many clothes. So I don't have to file fold them, but I'm not very good at folding. I'm not making neat little packages, And I think that's something where it's like, yes, I could practice and watch video tutorials, but I just don't really care enough. And so I think it's, the exercise is looking at what are the places in your life where you do want to improve and you do want to put effort in and kind of turn up that intention? And what are the things that you can just say, you know what, life is short. I don't care that much about having a curated fridge or a color-coded pantry or whatever the thing may be, like to just go easy on yourself.
Yeah. And so with that, I guess in mind, what areas are you still working on or that are coming new, areas you need to focus on as your children are growing older? I think that we've got both children who are very similar ages. So, they have so much more, I guess, agency in a way in terms of them saying, well, I want my bedroom to look like this, or I want to do that. What are the new challenges for you in your life within your home in terms of keeping it organized? Or maybe, you've just been in a busy season of publicity for the book, so do you find that during those seasons it's like, okay, I've got to give myself some grace with what my home looks and feels like? Or is it the opposite? Like, it's like, no, because I'm going to be busy, I need to like have some sense of calm and not chaos at home?
It's that. I mean, I wish I had like a laid back bone in my body, but I really don't. And I think when I get busy or stressed, I need my environment to be even better because it calms my nervous system. And we're at the point in our house, I mean, our house is quite small by American standards. And um, we really don't own a lot of stuff. And so maintaining our house has become remarkably easy. That's the truth. Like in our living room, we have a couch and a coffee table. There's not much to mess up, And so, with regard to my teenagers' rooms, though, that's really different because when they were quite little, it was like my little gallery and I would photograph their rooms and style them and took great pride in them. And they were in some magazines and all the rest. And then it's been a few years now, but they got to the point where they had their own personalities and preferences. And they were like, my room is not a magazine. I am a human and I want my room to be personal for me. And so now both of my girls have, pictures and posters all over, floor to ceiling, like taped up with Scotch tape. And at one point there was like fake ivy, that made me crazy. But I've just had to be like, I surrender. This is your room. It's your space. I don't want to drive you to therapy for the rest of your life because I'm making you curate your room in a way that pleases me. It's not my room. So I think that's a way in which I've kind of made peace with like, listen, we have a small home. The common spaces really need to be dialed in and peaceful and minimal, and everyone needs to maintain them. But you can shove whatever you want in your room. You can throw your backpack on the floor. You don't have to perfectly fold your clothes. You can put posters all over the ceiling. And that has worked really well for us. And I think likewise, I mean, my husband confessed a few years ago, he was like, there's so many benefits of living in a really minimal home, but I also feel like I don't have any place where I can just be super messy. And I said, well, yeah, let's figure that out. And so we ended up building this small shed in our backyard that is like his work shed where, he has a desk and a computer, but he has books and old CDs and mementos. And, I'll walk in there and just gasp because it is, to my standards, it is wild in there. Like I could never focus. I could never get anything done. But for him, it's like a place where he can totally kick back and relax and feel like nobody's going to tell him to clean up his mess. He's liberated. And so that's kind of how we've made it work. I guess in a sense, our bedroom is more like my space, and then he has his space and the girls have their bedrooms. And I think like having those boundaries has worked really well because you're never going to get your whole family on the same page in regards to like having the same, clutter threshold or desire for order or lack thereof. So this is my new theory, is that it's all about zoning your home so everybody feels like they have a space that is just right for them.
Yeah, I love that. And I can relate to all of that as my daughter has pictures of soccer players or posters on soccer players on her wall. But I will say that, and to just give a little bit of comfort or solace to people who do have children who are younger, what I found over the years is that all of my children, at some point, they get to a point where they just suddenly decide, that's it, I'm going to tidy my room.
Yes.
And they do it of their completely their own volition, or they throw out things. And again, this just happened the other night. As I mentioned, I was on this big trip with my son, 16-year-old son, and I was like, the vacuum cleaner? Who's using a vacuum cleaner? And it was something like, I don't know, like 8 or 9 o'clock at night or something like this. And he literally completely rearranged his room. He did have an exam the next day, so I wouldn't, it was like a type of procrastination. But he just he got rid
Wow.
of one of the desks. We had added this extra desk so he could do his projects, and he got rid of that because obviously I think he just felt that it was creating, dumping ground. And he rearranged his room. He vacuumed his room, and I was like, wow.
That is spectacular. None of my kids have gotten out a vacuum on their own volition yet. But I agree with you. I have seen as they've gotten older, like if they're having friends over, suddenly they'll just tidy and clean up because, it's for them and they want to impress their friends, or they'll just make their bed randomly, because they feel like it. So I have seen that. And, we were in that period many years ago where it just felt like never ending stuff with like the stuffed animals and the toys and the games and the art. And it was so much to manage. And now, my kids are almost 14 and 16. And really, they just hang out with their friends all the time. So all of that kind of gear and stuff and gadgets, it's a thing of the past. And it's just, I want to give hope to people who are wrangling all the toddler things. It gets so much easier.
Well, that kind of leads us into questions that somebody had submitted, which was, how do you stay on top of children's toys, even after gifting old toys to make room for new toys? I'm sure you get asked this question all the time. What's your approach or take on that?
Yeah, I'm super into like physical boundaries. I actually was a preschool teacher for a few years back in my 20s. And I found that kids really love order, and they thrive with order. And so I have this made up rule that works really well for me and my clients. That's the rule of 5. So if you have young kids, no more than 5 categories of stuff out at eye level at any time. So like if someone was starting from scratch, I would say get 5 big open floor baskets, and that's like your limit. And then so maybe in one is like stuffed animals and one is Lego, and you get to decide with your kids. But 5 to me is like more than enough with art and books and all the rest of it. And what I've found, at least in most American homes and playrooms, it's like countless categories and everyone's overwhelmed and overstimulated. So I always say like rule of 5, pick 5 or have your kids say, what are you the most into right now? We're going to set up, your 5 favorites. And then if you don't want to get rid of anything or your kid's not ready, you can just pack it up, put it away in, any type of storage like a closet or a basement, and swap out like a library, if they get bored or on a rainy day. But I think the biggest thing is just limiting volume is kids can't manage it. Adults get stressed out. It doesn't do anyone any good to have like endless toys. It just is so overstimulating for human beings.
Yeah.
So, even though my kids went through all the phases and, they wanted the plastic toys and the things with batteries that I wasn't very into, but I just kind of at a certain point gave up and said, that's fine. Like you're going to pick what you want to play with, but no more than 5 things at once can be out. And that just made the cleanup and the management of all of it very easy.
Yeah.
I'm curious for you too, because you have so many kids, and your home is so beautiful. Do you have any hacks for how you've kept your home so lovely while having children with things?
Yeah. I mean, I think that because I do have so many things, a lot of things get passed down. So we've had even our Lego was my husband's. So it was like his mum had kept it. I mean, she never threw anything out. So she kept his Lego collection, which became my eldest son. And then, I gave the girls that an option to play, but they actually were never interested in Lego. And then it became my youngest son's. But we've had, other things that is kind of like gets passed down, and the books, the Lal and, all of those books, they kind of get passed down as one child kind of outgrows it, it goes to the next one and so on. So we've definitely had lots of that. So in terms of not trying to have like too many new things in the home.
Yeah.
And in general, like with it, when it comes to gifting and Christmas, it's very hard to, control sometimes what grandparents give. But certainly in terms of what we we give. We're always try to have like less but better, so one year my younger son, he wanted a skateboard, so that was his gift. It was a skateboard, rather than like having lots of little things. Like I really try and avoid just the stuff that they just get bored of so quickly.
Totally.
Or if something's not well made. So one of his more recent presents was he really wanted an RC car, a remote control car. And that was like his big thing. And so I got a good quality one, because there are so many cheap ones out there that, you use once, they break, becomes landfill. So it really is about that. Okay, how can we get a good quality one that if he then outgrows it, we can pass it down to somebody else. So there, I guess, like some of the things that I'm always trying to think of, like what's a good quality version of this. Or, the girls have had like surfboards as gifts, like those big things that they use. And like a bike, those they tend to be the things that we gift, rather than just stuff.
Yeah, I know. I have found recently, my kids have been really into experiential gifts. So they will say like, will you take me and my girlfriend to dinner and a movie, or to the water slides, and like something fun with their friends has been very appealing. And then I'm like, yes, no clutter. And it's something they'll actually remember, I don't know. I don't really remember holiday gifts from my youth. Like they don't stand out in my memory.
Yeah. And I mean, if anything, with my eldest son, I'll say, so what do you like? I've asked the kids to give me a list. So for this year, for Christmas, so that at least I'm getting them something they want. And I'm not necessarily going to get what some of the things that are on the list, because like my son's like, my youngest son is like a Nerf gun. I'm like, no, we're not doing Nerfs. He's desperate for one though. But my old son is like, I don't want anything. I'm like, I've got it. And then I kind of get like, well, I've got to get you something. Like,
come on.
So we're going to have sometimes the opposite problem of like, he doesn't want anything. I mean, he's just had a very, privileged trip to travel around the world. So that's kind of his gift in some ways. But yeah, and I always say to the children as well, because they do like to. We've got this. It's like a secondhand shop, a charity shop. It's almost like a recycling shop in our local village. Basically, like people take things there and people buy things, but it's like really cheap. So it's almost like an exchange. Like we're constantly taking things there. Like, and so the kids are often going there on a Saturday morning to buy something, because they just want to buy stuff, and because I won't ever buy them anything. And so I say, okay, if you get something, something's got to go. So one in, one out. So I do try and say that to them, or at least make them kind of aware of that we can't just keep adding things to our home. If you want to get something new, then you've got to take something out. So that's another one. Okay, I've got another question for you. So other people who are messy, so this is like, a question of how to navigate this. Other people who are messy, like every system exists and still chaos, this woman was saying. So how do you, I guess, like dealing with other people, like what is, and I guess when it's important to you, and like you said, like for you having the sort of common areas in your home, that's important for you to have that tidy. Probably your husband could live, he could go either way. Maybe your girls could go either way, but that's important for you. So when it's important for you, and how do you, I guess, help other people see that is a priority, or the benefits of that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I would be a billionaire if I could solve this problem, because I think it's the most common question I get asked is for the people that do want to be tidier or more organized, but their family is not necessarily on board. Like, how do you get them on board? It's very difficult. And I think, we can ask, we can state our requests, we can try to make the systems as easy and as intuitive as possible. At the end of the day, they have to have some motivation for modifying their behavior. So it could be that, the motivation is just to make you happy, but I haven't found that to be effective in most households, right? People are like, I'm busy, or why do you care so much? And so I think I have had, as the person who cares by far the most in my family, I have had really good luck by getting the other people more involved in setting up the system. And I'm actually working with a family right now where it's really interesting, because the wife and the mom of the household is so frustrated because she's like, I set up all of these systems and nobody will maintain them. And then, so I came in and I spoke with, she has two sons and a husband. And I spoke with them and they kind of confessed that her systems didn't make sense to the way their brains worked. And so it wasn't that they were intentionally disrespecting her, it was that it just didn't feel like it made sense to them. So then I asked, like, well, what would make sense? Like, where would be the place where you would want to drop your mail? You know, and in this case, she had set up a system in an area that her husband rarely visited. So he was like, well, honestly, I need it right here. And so we just moved the vessel to where it would make more sense for him. So that's a little example, but I think it's really easy to kind of go to criticism and judgment when people in your family aren't following your systems. And I think as much as is possible to go to kind of inquiry and curiosity and like, hey, I set this up, I've noticed it's not working. Is there a better place or is there a different type of system that might be easier for you? And I think if it comes from that, like my husband used to leave his camera equipment all over the house. And I was like, hey, are you doing this because you just don't know where to put it? And he said, yeah, I guess so, right? And so I was like, okay, great. So if I got you a bin and labeled it camera stuff, would you just dump it all in that bin instead? And he said, yeah, that seems easy enough. So sometimes it is just problem solving with the person in a non-judgmental way that really can be the gateway to change.
Yeah, I do something similar with my children that it's probably sort of every quarter-ish or, you know, at least 2 or 3 times a year where we have like a big clean out room. You know, it does start to accumulate but I always get them, we do it together. I don't go in there and tidy their room for them. Right. We do it together. Yeah. And so I'll say, okay, this cupboard, are we still using the sewing things, you know, or are we doing, you know, okay, do we still want to have this? And sometimes they'll say, oh, no, not really. Or other times they'll say, yeah, you know, that's really still important. Okay, so let's, you know, do this and do that. And so we do it together. And I think that having that buy-in is so important and making people feel involved and kind of a bit of agency, which leads into another question. You might have already answered it, but I'll go through it. So the person said, the word club has a kind of negative connotation and can turn people away from wanting to tackle organizing projects, especially alongside family members who might make quick judgment calls about certain categories. Labeling it clutter when someone else feels that those items are treasures, heirlooms, or simply potentially useful little extra tools, for example. Have you found any good substitute for clutter or stuff that feels more dignified, or any other tips that can help ease the emotional strain of organized family home? So I guess it's this question of really, you know, what we might see is like, that's just your stuff. You know,
right.
They might be like, but that's my special thing, you know, like, or whatever.
Yes. Yeah, I love that question. I think, you know, calling anybody else's belongings clutter clearly could be perceived as offensive by that person. And I think, you know, the way I define clutter is anything that's kind of distracting you or disabling you from living your ideal or best life. So that's very personal. So I think I would just say, you know, in terms of semantics, like, calling it possessions or belongings or items feels really neutral to me, whereas clutter does feel judgy. And I think, you know, in terms of the delicate act of like, when you want to declutter more than people in your family do, or you want them to declutter, I always say you've got to like lead with your own, you got to walk the walk first before you ask anyone to do anything. And often I find when I say to somebody who's complaining about their family, well, have you decluttered all of your clothes, all of your paperwork, all of your mementos? They'll say, well, no, not yet, but I want them to do X, Y, or Z. So I will always say the one thing you have control over is your own belongings and your own decisions. And it really does take some time to go through and thoughtfully edit everything you've ever owned. I have found that by doing that myself, like my family sees that I'm walking the walk. I'm not asking them to do something that I haven't done myself. And I think there's a level of respect where it's like, I did this for myself before I asked you to lift a finger, as opposed to the kind of finger pointing and blame game that's so easy. I mean, I'm certainly guilty of it myself. And sometimes the thing that helps me is just saying, is it going to take me longer to talk to my kids about leaving their dirty socks on the couch, or to just throw the dirty socks in the laundry bin? It's easier to just toss them in and move along with my day, right? So it's also sometimes taking ownership of like, if you're the person who cares more, you can do a little more because other people aren't as affected, by the state of the home as you are.
Yeah, yeah, no, I definitely agree. Okay, another question. As someone who recently purchased a small home and hopes to make it last for a lifetime, hopefully even with kids someday, I'd love to know how you respond to those who tell us you'll outgrow your house in a year, start a home, but you'll want more space. I'm curious how you handle these conversations when there is so much hype in America around bigger equals better.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, because I'm in a much smaller home than most, and I think that I just fully embrace it. So people certainly have said those exact same things to me. And when we bought our home, I guess it's been 12 years now, people definitely were like, "Oh, nice starter home." And I just said, "Well, I think it might just be a nice home, you know?" So I handle it with humor because for me, I have no shame about having a small home. It's very intentional. I think a large home would stress me out and bring more problems. And so, yeah, so my response for that would just be to kind of like brush it off with humor and say, like, oh, I have enough to manage. Like, keeping a small home is so much easier for me. Or I just enjoy it. This might be for the long haul, and just owning that. Because I think the more people who talk positively about having smaller homes or living with less, like, I certainly could buy more things, but I choose intentionally not to. And it's totally flummoxing to many people where even like if somebody tries to give me something free and I'll say no thank you, they're like, no, it's free. And I say, I know, but I don't want it. And it's so astounding to people. So I think it's just getting more kind of comfortable and confident in your own values, and trying to dismiss other people's judgments or questions.
Yeah, great answer. Okay, another one. I'd love to get Shira's thoughts on the New Year's reset. Does she believe in starting the new year with a clean slate, sort of out with the old, in with a new idea? Or should January be about taking it slow and not making snap decisions out of a pressure to reinvent yourself, your home, yourself?
So I have a ritual that I do every year on New Year's Eve on December 31st. I clean out my closet, which is very fun for me. So it's less of a chore and very cathartic. And then my husband and I, now we've kind of whittled our paperwork down to this little file box, but we will spend, 10 or 15 minutes just going through to make sure we're not hanging on to paperwork that we don't need. That feels like a really nice reset for me, of like, I'm walking into the new year knowing I don't have excess paper or excess clothing weighing me down. I like to do like a quick sweep of the home so it just feels lighter. And then with regard to goals, I am a big goal setter and kind of a goal setting junkie. And I always like to do a life audit, which I also do on December 31st, where I look at the various buckets in my life and I just spend a few minutes reflecting on kind of level of satisfaction in each one. So I look at health and wellness, I look at my environment, my relationships, my career, my finances, and leisure and recreation, which I'm still terrible at. And I outline this process in the book, but it's really simple. I just rank each one from 1 to 5 based on level of fulfillment and satisfaction. So it's kind of a snapshot of like, this is my life here in this moment. And then based on whatever comes up there, I make a few tweaks of like, say if health was like a 1, it's kind of a wake up call of like, oh, I need to reinvest in my health. What small things can I do? And I do that with each category so that for me, it doesn't feel overwhelming, but it feels like this kind of lovely intentional exercise about like, what am I craving more of? How can I tend to myself and my life in a way that feels good? And so I'll do like kind of tiny little things in each bucket. So maybe it's thinking in the relationship category, gosh, I haven't gone away with my husband in ages. Like, let's sit down and plan a weekend together. So, like, one small thing we can do now. Finances, I haven't looked at my statements in ages. I need to, like, just make a date with myself to look at my finances and tend to them. So, I guess it's more micro goals. And then I typically like to set one big stretch goal for the year ahead, but I don't put pressure to do it like on any specific day or even in January. For me, that's kind of more organic and just knowing every year I always want to do like one new thing. So I've written 3 books in 3 years, so that's been a lot of new things. And truthfully, now that I have finished this 3rd book, I don't know what my next big thing is. So I'm kind of letting myself sit in the uncertainty of that and waiting for some new inspiration. And then that will become whatever it is, will become like my new big goal.
Yeah. Well, the questions that I wanted to ask you from your book kind of tie in with that, which was you say this, which I love. You say, planning takes time, but it makes time. And I think that so often, I mean, I'm a big planner. I love planning out. You know, I've got a like an annual calendar that I plan out my year. I've got, you know, I like to plan out my days. I find that when I know what's coming ahead, it just makes me feel calm inside. It's like I'm not scrambling, or I don't look back on the day and go, oh, where did that time go? I feel like I've done nothing,
Right.
you know, whereas I feel like, oh yeah, I actually got those things done. And so for me, that's, you know, really good. But I do come across people who have a lot of resistance to planning, that it sounds like, oh, it sounds like hard work. Why would you know, spend time filling your calendar, you know, all of those. I love this idea of planning takes time, but it makes time. And we take the time to plan, we actually create more time in our life. So you have these journal prompts, and I want to turn the tables on you, if you don't mind.
Ooh.
So the journal prompts were, what do I want to create space for in the coming year? So for you, what do you want to create space for in the coming year?
Ooh, gosh. I think because my girls, for the first time, they're at an age where I'm realizing they're not going to be in my house forever. I think I want to create space to just spend more relaxed time with them. So putting my phone away, putting my computer away, not necessarily having to plan like one more thing or one more outing, but just like relaxed quality leisure time with my girls. That feels like a really important goal.
Yeah, I can really relate to that. And that kind of ties in with me doing something. You know, it's that thing of like
Yeah.
being engaged with what they're engaged with. And I think that when they're younger, when your children are younger, it's, you know, I mean, it's like they go to bed at 7 o'clock or something like that. It's like, oh, I have the evening to
Right.
myself now. Whereas now it's
Yeah.
like the kids are like, okay, so what are we doing? Because we don't have a TV, so it's not like we're sitting around TV, or, you know, it's, so we,
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
we need to kind of like have that time together, and like, what are we going to do together as, you know, as a family, and how do we spend our time? So, yeah, I can
Wow,
really
I'm just
appreciate
marveling
that.
that you don't have a TV. I think I knew that about you, but it's so kind of incredible. I'm just thinking about like, wow, if we didn't have a TV, how much more time would I have in my day? Maybe that's my goal, to watch less TV.
Honestly, I mean, like, look, I mean, occasionally my husband and I will watch, you know, the odd. I saw in your book you referenced White Lotus, and we went through the whole White Lotus series,
Yes.
and which was fantastic. You know, so we'll go through series, but also like sometimes, you know, people
Yeah.
say like, oh, this show is really great, and I watch one episode, I'm like, yeah, it's not for me, and I won't watch it, just for the sake of watching it because other people are talking about it. Like I've actually got to think, no, this is really great writing, great storytelling, really compelling. Like this is actually worth my while. Otherwise I'd just rather read a book. But I mean, personally for me as well, I feel like, how do people have time to watch TV? I don't know. Like I'm just...
Yeah, we find the time. Yeah, it's such a like family routine for us at night, like post dinner, post dishes. It is kind of like how we unwind as a family.
Yeah.
But I think, what I'm hungering for is more of like connected time, of really like talking and listening to my kids and hanging out with them as opposed to just staring at a screen together.
Yeah.
I
think soccer
different
comes
quality.
into a lot. We seem to have a lot of soccer practice in our world at the moment. Okay, your next question is that you have as a journal prompt. What would I like to prioritize and accomplish? So what would you like to prioritize and accomplish for 2025?
Gosh, I mean, here's the thing. I don't know yet. And we're creeping in on the end of 2024. My goal for this year was to publish this new personal development book. And I mean, I'll throw out there that I've always wanted to produce a documentary about people and their stuff. And I don't know for certain that 2025 is the year to do it, but I at least would like to investigate and learn more about how to produce a documentary and what might be involved, because that's definitely like a bucket list thing for me. Oh, I know what my answer is. My answer is that I want to take my family to Thailand, and that is definitely a goal for 2025. I will do it. By the next time you talk to me, I will have planned a trip to Thailand.
Amazing. Why Thailand?
Yeah.
What appeals to you about Thailand?
Well, I don't know. It just seems so different. The culture, we love the food. I have found Thai people to be so kind and so welcoming. We have like a decently large Thai community where we live. And yeah, it just feels like, I mean, it's so far away from us where we live in California. And I think taking my girls somewhere that just feels so different, culturally, the landscape, the food, the language. And I think they're at ages where they would really appreciate it and remember it. And it's just felt so hard to find the time, and it's so far away and it's quite expensive to get there. But I can't believe I forgot that is my goal for 2025, is this big family trip.
Amazing. Fun. Okay,
Yeah.
and last one from these questions. I mean, they're all sort of slightly variations on the same thing, but something new might come up. What would I like to be different or better by the end of the year?
So I really want to prioritize strength training in my body. My mom and her mom have osteoporosis, and I think I still feel so young, but I'm in my late 40s and things are shifting in my body, and I'm like achy in places I was never achy. And I just was thinking, I think this is really a year where I want to lean into health and fitness in a way that I never have done in my life. I have never been an athlete. I never played team sports. I was always kind of on the arty side. And so it's very much out of my comfort zone. Like when you said you go, I was like, I don't know how to play soccer. I have no idea.
I didn't either.
So you didn't. Okay. Well, there's hope for me then. But I think, I want to feel at the end of 2025 like I am physically very strong and very fit. So it's not about losing weight or having a different type of body. For me, it's like how I feel in my body. I want to feel really kind of strong and empowered, and like I'm setting up my body for aging in a smart way.
Yeah, I love that. Now, I feel like I did have some other questions, and I feel like I can't not ask some other questions, even though I could tie a little bow on the end of the interview. So if you don't mind, just
Let's do
indulging
it.
me a little bit longer.
Sure.
Okay, so I did want to ask you, because obviously you do talk about business, and like you said, we can talk about business till the cows go home, and lots of people who listen to this podcast do have businesses. They are solopreneurs. They or they have some kind of design business, some people are into decluttering and so on. And I know you do mentorship, and I know that you help people in their business. What are some of the big roadblocks that you see with people in relation to that, and how do you advise them to get beyond roadblocks?
Ooh, I could talk about this all day. You're never going to get rid of me now. So I would say the number one thing that I see getting in people's way is deciding they're going to do something, like making a business decision, and then almost immediately changing their minds and pivoting. And I see it all the time, so much so that I think I've realized it's a way that people protect themselves from failure, because if you don't put yourself out there and you change your mind and you pivot, you never really have to do that vulnerable part of business, right? And I've worked with so many brilliant, talented people who will say, like, okay, and we'll make a whole plan around, say, launching an organizing business, and they'll have a name and packages and pricing, and I give them homework, and then the next week when they come back, they say, well, I thought about it and I really like photography. And what if I was a photographer? And I'm like, wait, what? And this happens so often that I've now kind of said to people, if we're going to work together in like a mentorship capacity, what you have to promise me is that if we decide together that you're going to do something, you're going to follow through and do it. And if you change your mind, you can write down your new idea, but you still have to stay the course with the original idea. Because I think the big thing about business and the coolest thing about entrepreneurship is that you learn so much about failure and about vulnerability and about making mistakes if you stay the course with one thing. And that is ultimately what strengthens you as an entrepreneur, as an artist. It makes you unstoppable if you can face the adversity and pivot and keep going. But if you're always changing your mind, and I see this a lot with websites too, with people being like just about to market their business, and then they're like, you know what, I've got to change my whole website. And the redesign, and I need new photos, and I hate this color. And I will say to people, it doesn't matter. Like, people are going to hire you because of you and what you're putting out in the world and your energy. It doesn't matter what font this is right now. That's such like small potatoes. So that's the big thing I would say, is like focus on becoming a finisher, a person who follows through on the thing that they say they're going to do, because no matter what, you will be better on the other side of that than if you are constantly changing your mind and not really producing any real results.
That is just so brilliant, Shira. I'm so glad that I asked you that question, because I can know of so many people that I could apply those ideas to. And I'm sure that, and I'm curious, you really have stayed the course with what you do. I'm sure that you could have gone like, oh, maybe I do more styling, or, because you've got, definitely got skills with styling. And I know that you've got elements of that within your business, but, I'm sure that there are so many different ways that you could have like, maybe I'm going to go down this path or down that path. How have you personally being able to stay so consistent with what you do and with your mission, I guess? Because I'm sure you've had moments where you could have easily gone this way or that way.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's two things. One, because I am a creative who gets bored easily, and so I do constantly want to make changes. And I've found that like I've been able to build this business umbrella around home and life simplification and minimalism, but that can lend itself to so many different things. So under that umbrella, I do business mentoring, I do retreats for female founders, I do programs and courses. So I have been able to keep my mind kind of still busy and active in a way that feels fun and stimulating, while still committing to this same overall theme. And I think the thing that's helped me the most in terms of not kind of giving up or pivoting or changing gears is the idea that I would rather do one thing really well than a lot of things and be kind of mediocre. And I know that you can't be the best at something if you stop doing it. And so I really love the idea of kind of reaching my own personal best in this field. And now I've been in it long enough where I feel like, I have been able to like achieve a certain level of success that I'm so glad that I didn't give up the million times that I wanted to. And so that's what I would say kind of for anyone struggling is that I will admit that probably like roughly every year of the 15 years I've had my business, I've had the thought that I should give up or quit or leave or do something totally different. And I've had to stay like, no, you've got to think about how good it would feel to kind of be on the other side of this career where you've really reached your personal best. So that kind of propels me to just keep getting better at the one thing instead of trying a new thing.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, I'm going to just keep with a few more questions on this theme because
Okay.
so insightful and I think really helpful. I wanted to talk to you about your marketing because you take a really simple approach to marketing, which I think ties in, and you do talk about the book as well. You talk about the way that, you've kind of shaped your career and some of the decisions that you've made. So correct me if I'm wrong, but you send just a one monthly email. Are you still just doing one monthly email? I think that you certainly don't send them super regularly. Is that correct?
So I do a weekly email.
Okay, you do a weekly email, but
Yeah.
a monthly blog.
Nope, just one weekly newsletter
Right.
through Substack.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I think
okay.
you're probably thinking of when I started my business 15 years ago, I kind of kicked it off with a monthly newsletter because that felt very doable to me.
Yes.
And I had like 2 people on my mailing list. So I didn't want to harass them every week. Now that I've built a really, sizable community, I do send a newsletter once a week. Every week on Tuesday at 5 a.m. it goes out. So I'm very consistent about that. But that's really like the one thing. I'm much more fly by the seat of my pants with social media. I don't plan my content. I don't have a content calendar. I truthfully don't really have any strategy behind it. I only share when I feel like sharing. So the newsletter is really like the one thing that I've told myself every week, no matter what, you are sending out high quality content at Tuesday, 5 a.m.
Yeah. But with your Instagram though, it is very, you've got a really simple grid, it's when you could probably go so many different directions, and do all the bells and whistles that Instagram wants everyone to do, are really consistent with, the type of content that you put out, quality of the content that you put out. And similarly with your newsletter, you're really consistent and it's a very simple, approach to marketing where, there are so many different, bells and whistles that you can do. And I'm just curious about your approach to creating a business that is really in alignment with the life that you want to live, where it can feel like sometimes we have to do all the things in our business. How do we focus on the ones that are the most important?
Yeah, so I love applying minimalism to business because minimalism is all about figuring out what the most important things are and kind of deleting the rest of them. And so for me, my approach has been I'm picking one form of social media, Instagram, because I like that it's visual and that's it. So I don't post on Pinterest. I am never on LinkedIn. I deleted Twitter, now X, years ago. So it's like fewer better, constraining my energy and effort. So I do always tell my mentee clients, like, unless you love social media and it's super energizing for you, which I have yet to meet someone who falls in that category, pick one and do a great job at showing up consistently and providing excellent content on that one platform. And then I think having one other thing, whether it's a podcast or a newsletter, or a blog. There's so many different things you could do. For me, I'm a writer. I've always loved writing. And so my newsletter is as much for me as it is for everyone else. It's like therapeutic. I only write about things I'm interested in that are kind of topical. And I've never liked feeling like I'm marketing or selling to people. And so what's worked really well for me in terms of keeping in alignment with who I am is thinking, if my job is to just show up and give value and help people, then when I occasionally do open doors to a program or a retreat, people already know me, they get me, and they trust me. And so I don't have to do a lot of heavy lifting. And so an example is, I run this very small retreat with a co-founder where we have 20 female founders and we go on an annual retreat. And we both hate marketing. And so last year I said to her, I'm going to try something and I'm going to just send one email. And the subject line is going to say, this is the only email I will send out about the retreat. And I meant it because the last thing I wanted to do was like email people every day for 25 days and bombard them and hit them over the head, because that's not what I would want as a consumer. And so I sent out this one email. And I think because, now for 15 years, I've developed a relationship and a trust in a community, that retreat filled up from one email. And so that for me was like a big life lesson of, if you're really generous and you help people and you don't expect anything in return, then when you do have like a product or a program, those people already are kind of primed to want to support you and want to buy from you. So I think I was telling you too, I don't send sales emails anymore, or like an email that would just be considered a dedicated sales email. I send an email about something that will help people. And then in the bottom, kind of as a footer, I have links to my programs and my mentorship. And it's kind of it's there if you want it. It's easy to find for the people that want it, but I'm not going to bombard you with email after email because it just feels so inauthentic to me.
Yeah, no, I love that. And so just finally, I mean, you might have answered it already, but what lesson or piece of advice would you give to your younger self in relation to both business, maybe business, home, and life?
I mean, probably the advice I would give is don't rush. Like, there is no rush, there's no fire. And I think because I am kind of naturally wired as an anxious personality, I'm always kind of feeling like I'm racing to do the thing and I'm racing to keep up. And, it's very much a scarcity mindset. And I think I now have a body of evidence that like, it's okay. You don't have to rush. You can slowly build, you can develop, you can trust that if you put high quality work into the world, people will respond, but you don't have to like blast it out super fast before somebody else does it, And I think, that's something I'm always working on, is just racing never gets you anywhere faster. If anything, I think racing and rushing can slow you down because you don't make grounded decisions when you're like running like a maniac. So I would just say slow down, take your time, and have faith that it'll happen.
Yeah, love that. All right. Thank you so much, Shira. Really appreciate, as always. I could talk about another 5 hours.
Me too.
And it'll probably get darker and darker in your living room.
Yes.
Before your dining room. But
Totally.
no, I really appreciate your time and always being so honest and open and giving, and really encourage everybody to go out and get Shira's latest book, Lifestyle. It really is just so filled with helpful tips, advice, and if you want Shira's sort of like voice in your ear, giving you that gentle encouragement, it very much is written in your voice, which I really love. And so, yeah, you do get that sense of like, yes, okay, I can do this. So So really excited for everyone to get hold of that. And thank you once again for being on the podcast. Always so much fun.
Oh, thank you so much. This was so fun.